I'm your host, Donna Cates, and each week we'll dive into powerful stories, expert strategies, and practical tools to help you take charge of your financial future. Whether you're planning for retirement, navigating a divorce, or simply looking to build your wealth with confidence, this is your space to grow, learn, and thrive. Let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm honored to introduce you to Kara Hartl, who owns Troy Medical. And Kara, we're going to ask you to give us about a 90-second overview or introduction to yourself, what you're doing, and why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm. So my name is Kara Hartl, and I'm an ophthalmologist by training and did the crazy thing straight out of residency, went up to the middle of interior Alaska and started a practice straight from scratch. Discovered I was an entrepreneur and practiced ophthalmology in Alaska for 15 years. In a small town, about 400 miles from the nearest big town, we had about 40,000 people in our town, a draw of about 100,000. We were 400 miles and about 6 hours from the nearest specialty clinics in Anchorage and a 4-hour flight from Seattle. So we are talking about isolation. Yes, exactly. So this is rural, underserved America, isolated. We experienced firsthand limitations to access to care. Like this was my world for 15 years. And I saw my patients suffer, and there were things that I couldn't fix because I don't know how to manage an insulin pump. I'm not an endocrinologist. When people are going blind, I can try to prevent their eye disease from blinding them, but really this is a systemic management for the long term. Same with a lot of rheumatologic disease. Somebody's having terrible scleritis or retinal vasculitis from a rheumatologic condition, and they need systemic management. I can only do so much in the eye. And so for years and years and years, I experienced this, and I watched my patients struggle with long wait times if they go down to Anchorage, or having them and a family member fly down to Seattle. The cost was just enormous, and honestly, a lot of people just didn't go. They got substandard medical care, and they had suboptimal disease management, and just like this was the reality. And it was heartbreaking, and I couldn't fix it until COVID changed the way we access medicine. One of the biggest silver linings that came out of the pandemic was the fact that this virtual visit that we're having right now became normal. Everybody learned how to access other people remotely, and more importantly, in this particular case, medicine remotely. Doctors figured it out, patients figured it out, insurance companies started paying for it. So suddenly the ability to access medical care changed forever. And what that meant for me living in my small town in Alaska was that all of a sudden I could get access to a part-time rheumatologist who didn't want to live in Fairbanks, Alaska, who could actually live almost anywhere in the country. And I could get their expertise delivered into my clinic because I already knew how to do everything. Labs, radiology, infusions, biopsies, injections, like you name it, I could get it done in my hometown. I could walk my patients through the entire process, help them navigate, when do you get labs? How do you do the insurance? What's an explanation of benefits? All of these things that are part of medicine as well. They're the frustrating, annoying, stupid part of medicine, but they have to get done in order to get the care. And so being able to walk the patient through all of that and then deliver that care into my community suddenly became a viable option. And for the first time, I could get a rheumatologist to treat my patient's lupus, and I could have an endocrinologist manage someone's, insulin pump, and a neurologist is managing their MS. For goodness sake, this is like what it's supposed to be. And so when I figured this out and then started implementing it, it was like fireworks went off. It was absolutely amazing. The impact actually was even more than what I thought it was going to be. It's like watching your brainchild come to life and then just take wings and soar. It was absolutely spectacular. And so I decided that this is actually my real impact, is bringing specialty medical care to the 75 million people across our country that are suffering right now because they don't have access.
I'm going to share this with you. This is a visual, so I can totally relate. insulin pump,
Yep.
hopefully
There's your insulin pump.
prognosis,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
eyes. Yep, just had my
Yep.
ophthalmology appointment to make sure I have no retinopathy, all of the things. But I live in the middle of a
Good for
fairly
you.
large city, so it's not an issue. And to think that this came out of something like COVID, what a blessing.
Mhm. There are silver linings, and honestly, at the end of the day, people will look back at that pandemic, and there's things that were disasters. There are things that honestly were miracles.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, I want to ask, so, where did you live prior to making that drastic move, and why there?
Well, so I'm a California girl, Southern California, Orange County. I hopscotched the country, for undergraduate in Boston, med school in San Diego, and then I was actually down at this like ivory tower, amazing training facility called the Bascom Palmer Eye Institute in Miami. And my husband hated Miami. And so we actually, it was like, all right, you came down for me, where do you want to go? And there is an opportunity up in Fairbanks, Alaska. And it was like, oh, okay, well then. And all right, little California girl, here you go. And honestly, it was one of the best things I've ever done. And as you look back, you're like, how did this path, where did that come from? Why did that happen? And I don't believe in predetermination or any of that stuff, but every once in a while, you're like, I would never have been doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't had this ivory tower version of reality of like you practice exceptional medicine at all times of Bascom Palmer and then go essentially into the middle of nowhere. Now, don't get me wrong, Fairbanks is actually a pretty spectacular town. It's a university town. It's not like it's not the middle of nowhere reality. It's just located right next to it. And so, but this small town actually showed me what rural underserved medicine was all about. And because of that experience and because of discovering what an entrepreneur I am, I could put these two things together and then sprinkle a little pandemic telehealth on top of it. And now this idea came. And I would never have been able to, do what I'm doing now, which I really think is going to have a dramatic impact if I hadn't made the choice to go live in Alaska for 15 years. And honestly, I love it. They are some of the most spectacular, amazing, wonderful people in the entire world that live in Fairbanks, Alaska. And they're my patients and I love them and I still miss you guys
That's
so
so
much.
awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. So tell me, and you may have already addressed this a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper. What is the biggest problem that you're seeing in your industry now, and how are you working to solve that? And it sounds like the remoteness, just all of the logistics, but expound on that for me.
So there's a lot of problems in medicine. I mean, anybody who knows medicine knows medicine's a wee bit of a mess. Between insurance authorizations, declining reimbursements, increasing administrative burden, um, 30 to 40% of people left medicine in the pandemic because medicine was such a mess. None of those have actually gotten all that much better. It's still a mess. Unfortunately, every year we go, physicians are making less money now than they've ever made before. And the rising costs of doing business are going through the roof. And so the economic pressures of medicine are making it really, really hard for doctors. I'm now a CEO more than I am a doctor. So I now run all of this and figuring out like all these doctors left medicine and figuring out how to have the insurance payments pay for a doctor's reimbursement and still do all of the care delivery that the patient needs to be able to get the job done. Because medicine is complex. There's explanation of benefits, coordination of benefits, insurance authorizations. Like you can only have this insulin pump because your insurance only pays for that continuous glucose monitor, and you're only allowed to use this company and that company. I mean, like it's just the logistics of it are so complex, and someone needs to actually walk them through that. And that person is a human that needs to know all these answers, and there's no reimbursement model for that person. And so how does our declining reimbursement for the doctors, which every year gets a pay cut, combined with the like person who does the authorizations and the coordination of benefit and all of the things that the patient needs to get that done, those economic pressures are inverse. And there's just like, this is a challenge. And so one of the things that happens is physician practices sell to large hospital systems. Large hospital systems don't go work in rural America. The small critical access hospitals close down because the economic pressures are such that they literally just can't make ends meet. And doctors are then going into the big cities, and the doctor actually ends up being a loss lead for the hospital because they actually lose money for the hospital in order to be able to bill for the labs, the infusions, the radiology, all of the stuff that the hospitals actually can generate revenue to survive on. So some of the financial pressures of the way medicine is navigated nowadays, it's really crushing rural hospitals and rural communities. So how do we figure out a model that can bring the doctors from whatever city they live in into those small towns so that all that stuff stays at that small town? That's one of our biggest issues, and creating that model system that does everything it needs to do with the pennies that get paid for it. So the economic pressures of what medicine has done and is now is one of the hardest things to be able to navigate. And honestly, like the critical access hospitals have it 10 times worse, which is why they're going out of business. And we're having these hospital systems that serve 4 counties go bankrupt, like close their doors to all the patients because literally they cannot afford to stay open. It's tragic.
It is. It sounds horrible. And I know from personal experience, my dad had an emergency room visit. We were in a small town in Alabama, and he literally was in the emergency room for 48 hours because they didn't have enough staff to put him on a floor. And that they just can't
Yep.
keep people. So that's
Yep.
just one small component of the
Yep.
hundreds of moving pieces, right?
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
It,
Um,
yeah. Rural medicine it's challenging. And we're one of the secondary, or actually I call it the tertiary benefit of our company. Primary benefit is patients get access to care. Secondary benefit is we support the primary care doctors who really don't want to be managing lupus or MS. Let me tell you that one. They do not want to manage somebody's lupus, but it's on their shoulders. And so if we give them a rheumatologist, they are happy as a clam to say, yep, that lupus is yours to manage. Secondary benefit to the doctors for the support system to practice the best medicine they can. The tertiary benefit is the fact that these hospitals actually now can utilize their ancillary services, their labs, their radiology. They already have an MRI. They now have doctors who will order the MRI. And so it maintains their financial viability by keeping those outpatient services local. And that actually, it like helps the whole system keep going round. So that's actually oftentimes our access point is explaining to the hospital systems, this is what we do. Like we actually, because we make them money, we have to pay them for the privilege of being there. So they can't give us anything for free. That's called a kickback. And so we have anti-kickback laws and Stark laws. So we actually pay them for use of their facilities. And then we keep their ancillary supports local. And so that they're able to actually maintain their financial viability while actually providing exceptional care and supporting their primary care staff. So it's actually kind of a brilliant
Wow,
win-win.
it sounds awesome. So, and I'm curious, this is a unique business structure, business model that you've created. Do you see this expanding across the U.S.?
Absolutely. That's what we're doing right now. We're expanding across, we're relatively new still. The model is working beautifully, and we just started expanding across Texas. So we've gone from our 2 Sentinel hospital or 2 Sentinel clinics where we figured all this stuff out. How do you do this? How do you bill for that? How do you make this work? Where's the care coordination? ... Made our pretty playbooks for like, here's exactly what everybody does, and here's your instructions and your training manuals. And then last September, we said, all right, let's go. We went to our first Torch conference, and Texas has an amazing rural hospital association called the Texas Organization for Rural Community Hospitals, or Torch. Amazing organization, extremely well organized. And so we went to that conference and basically said, this is what we do. And the response has been amazing. It's been really spectacular. I'm now drinking through a fire hose because we've gone from 2 clinics to 9 clinics, and we open a new location about every week. And it's just, everyone's like, we need this. I'm like, I know you do. Like, everybody in rural America needs this. They're like, well, we already have a rheumatologist. I'm like, awesome. Do you have endocrinology, neurology, and pulmonology? They're, no, we don't. Would you like that? Yep, we would. What's our minimums? No minimums. We'll have a doctor there 1 hour a week if you need it. And I'm like, okay. And so we can just solve that piece by piece and like really create this little bespoke version for this community. We'll plug your rheumatology, neurology, and pulmonology gap here. You got this covered. Okay, we'll cover endocrine, neuro, and cards here. You got that covered. And like go through all these different things to figure out what each community needs and then fill that need and then just keep going to the next community. So right now we're hiring doctors, like literally left, right, upside down, and backwards. And then next year we start rolling out to the next states, because the reality is it's needed everywhere. There's 75 million people out there who live in physician shortage areas. That's 22% of our population live in underserved communities. It's insane how big it is. So we're going as fast as we can, and we're gaining speed and gaining traction.
It sounds like you probably could use about 10 more of you, Kara.
I only wish. Can someone else please learn how to clone?
Absolutely. Well, and it sounds, I was going to pose the question where you see the industry going the next 5 to 10 years, but I would imagine that your organization and your model is literally going to change the way medicine is practiced throughout all rural US.
That's my vision. Like, that's my big vision, is 100% to change how we access it, because we already in a physician shortage. It's going to get worse before it gets better, if it ever gets better. So we have to change the way we do it, because doctors are living in larger cities, period. This is what's happening. Specialists more than ever. And yet patients are scattered all over. This issue is ubiquitous in the United States, but it's kind of also ubiquitous across the world. Like the implications for this and like how we change the delivery system is just, we have to do it differently, because we just can't serve the people that need to get served. And as a result, people are suffering. Like my patient Troy, who the company is named after. And, he needed this so much. And now we can bring this to all the other Troys across the country.
Tell us a little bit more about your story with Troy and how he became the name of your company.
Well, so I thought of this idea in December of 2020, where we were up in Alaska. And as most people remember, December 2020 was a little bit stressful. Like everything was shut down. In medicine, it was craziness, because we were all in N95 masks, like basically full body sanitization every time you leave the hospital or the clinic. I mean, it was a fear community. Everybody was afraid. Everybody was tapped out on their stress levels, just living on adrenaline. And the idea of this came as like, well, if I can just bring a rheumatologist 1 day a week we could actually fix all these things. And so the idea started to gel in my mind, and I brought it to my staff, and they looked at me like, oh, you can't be serious. You're going to start a project right now in December 2020. And I was like, okay, never mind. Sorry, you guys, we're all good. Let's just keep breathing, get through the day. We're good. 2 to 3 weeks later, a patient that I'd been taking care of for a decade came in, and he saw me for uveitic glaucoma due to his psoriatic arthritis. He also had diabetes, peripheral neuropathies. His rheumatologist had a baby and left town because of COVID, and down in Anchorage. It was 400 miles away still, but she left town, so we had no rheumatologist anymore, and his primary care doctor just moved back home as well. And he was being treated with prednisone for his psoriasis, sending his sugars through his roof, worsening his neuropathies, and his eyes were a hot mess. And this incredibly amazing, highly functional, capable executive could barely make it across my office. And I came out of his exam room like in tears, like just flat out. And I looked at my at my Stephanie, my clinical director, and she says, "We're starting the company, aren't we?" I'm like,
It's
"Yeah, we're starting the
time.
company." Now it's a person, and I said, "I now know how to bring the exact care that you need. How can I not?" I mean, I had to. I can't look at him in the eye and say, "So sorry, I'm not willing to work hard enough to save your life." Nope, that's never going to come out of my mouth. And so the next day at our office meeting, I had my team like, "All right, you guys, we need a name for this project." And Laura, my manager, said, "Well, why don't we name it after Troy?" It's like, yep,
Awesome.
that was an
How
easy choice.
special.
And so Troy Medical
Yeah,
was born.
absolutely wonderful. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, Kara, and ask you a question. What is the biggest failure or challenge that you faced to this point in your life, whether it's professional or personal, and how has that shaped the way you're doing business today?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, I'm going to say that, so I'm going to put it as challenge, not so much failure, um, because I think honestly, failure is when you stop, and a challenge is what you overcome. And it fails only when you stop. And one of the things that entrepreneurship and honestly parenting has taught me is that you don't stop and then you don't fail, because you just iterate and figure it out and find a solution and you keep going. And as long as you keep going and you keep getting up, it doesn't matter how many times you get kicked down. So there is no question that COVID and the ensuing fallout of COVID was not easy. It was not easy for me. It was not easy for my family. It was not easy for my staff. Imagine the isolation. I mean, most of my staff was young 20 women. And so the isolation that demographic had was legit. And then you take it into the winter in Fairbanks, Alaska, where there's 2.5 hours of darkness. Oh my gosh. The mental health crisis that happened in Alaska, like I err to like crazy energy, if you haven't been able to figure that one out. So luckily I don't err to depression, because it was crushing everybody around me. And this was the reality of it. If I could have put Prozac in the water in Fairbanks, I would have done it. My staff was on rotating. This is why they said not now. Rotating, mental health visits throughout. I mean, it was it was a thing. And and then I had late elementary school kids also experiencing the isolation of the pandemic, and then decided that I was going to blow my life up and start a new company, move down to Austin, redo my career, sell my business, and redefine what my world was. Which I think sometimes when you really face like, oh my gosh, this is a thing, like getting my kids getting my kids into a lighter environment was one of the better things I've ever done in my life. Starting a company that was entirely focused on life-saving care that was such meaning to all of my staff that are involved was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Blowing my life up in the pandemic was a necessity to make that happen, but it wasn't easy. And selling my business, starting a new one, moving halfway across the country, like redefining everything, being a super mom for my kids who are coming out of total isolation, like supporting my staff as we went through this change, hiring new staff to bring the meaning of like them to understand the impact and the why of why we do this, which is Troy and all the other people like Troy, and having people understand that and that kernel of meaning to pull people through situations and make it so that is a beacon for them during their hard times in life. It was one of the better things I've ever done, and it wasn't easy. So I'm going to call it a challenge because we're still going. I mean, it's still not easy. Startups are hard. Scaling is hard. Growth is hard. But the impact and the meaning, the why that we're doing this is so important. My children are thriving here in Austin, And, it's like I said, it's one of the better decisions I've ever made, but it wasn't
Right.
easy.
Well, and I really appreciate what you said too about the failure. That's literally just having given up. Yeah, of course you failed, you quit. Versus challenges, and that's where we work through the challenge and we achieve. That's significant. And I think a lot of people sometimes get so wrapped up in the turmoil of whatever it is we're facing that we lose the why. And you mentioned the why a couple of times, so that's always got to be
Mhm.
the driver of how we stand up and take action, even when it's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, the most important things in life are not easy. They're not. And, how many times have we, I mean, my children are the single most important thing in my entire life. And I'm going to tell you that being a parent isn't always that easy. Like, it's the greatest joy you've ever known, but it's not easy. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, but the hardest things in life are a lot of work, and they're
That's
worth it.
right. All right. So, going to shift gears again. If you could have lunch with anybody, living or deceased, who would that be and why?
Um, I have to, it's going to be a little controversial. We'll see what people think about this one, but honestly, I would choose Elon Musk. Um, and the why is, irrespective of people's opinions on whatever's, and honestly, I don't care. Um, the reality is somebody has been mind-blowingly successful in their life. They could do anything they want, and he's trying to do right by humanity. And I've seen a lot of people make a ton of money and then just kind of peace out or go buy an island or do whatever, not go start a company that is going to change the course of humanity, not try to try to tackle the untackleables, even if it's not. I mean, nothing big is ever going to be popular on either side. Like, it's just not going to be. You're never going to be popular if you're trying to do something that is entrenched. If you're trying to do something that is revolutionary, if you're trying to do something that nobody's ever done before. The complaints about not giving enough to world hunger, for example. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I have a nonprofit that goes and cures blindness. Awesome. Like, does the richest man in the world donate to my nonprofit? No. Go invent a space company and redefine technology so that we have outer space. I'll do the stuff that I can do. Like, I can't change the course of human history. I'm not, I don't have that much power. Maybe I will. We'll see. But when you have the ability to change literally the course of human history, don't tackle a project that is in my realm of tackling. Tackle a project that is like space travel, or like redefining how we do X, Y, or Z. And the fact that it's all uphill, it's all unpopular, like tomatoes being thrown at him left and right. And yet, instead of retiring and doing any of the easy stuff, he's tackled all the hard stuff and has been grossly unpopular, and for all of these different things. And I'm fascinated by somebody who could take an easy path and instead takes the hardest path, the one where people say nasty things about you. I wouldn't be able to handle that. And I would love to sit down and have lunch with somebody who makes that choice in
Yeah,
life.
that's awesome. And I can just feel the energy coming off of you and just speaking of it. And I think, the disruptors, they're the change makers. The disruptors they're the
Mhm.
ones that are making things happen. And like you said, he's not just making little changes. He makes significant ones and then goes, what next? What's next? Let's keep going.
Yeah, giant goals, like moonshots, but actually it's kind of like the next solar system, like those kinds of shots. I'll shoot for the moon. He shoots for like
Right.
Andromeda.
There you go. Got it. Well, listen, I want to be able to share with our audience how they can reach out to you, connect with you, learn more about supporting you, or maybe even getting involved in your business. How would they connect with you?
So LinkedIn is always great. Admittedly, I'm not always the best at responding to messages. So if you want to reach out to me, kara.hartl@troymed.com. That's Kara.HARTL, no E, at troymed.com. I would love to reach out. I would love to connect to anybody who hears this and thinks that'd be worth
And I
connecting with.
think there are going to be a lot of people who are interested in what you're offering the world out there, because it is going to be so impactful. So I certainly appreciate you being on the show today. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, informed, and ready to take the next step in your financial journey. Remember, building wealth isn't just about money, it's also about creating a life that aligns with your goals and values. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with the women in your life who deserve financial empowerment too. Until next time, stay confident, stay empowered, and keep building the life you desire.